It's been a dramatic week in politics. Thankfully, we have the analysis of Shields and Brooks. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Welcome to you both. Happy Friday. You may remember there was an election earlier this week. Look, yesterday, Lisa Desjardins, our political team, did a wonderful breakdown looking at the new Congress. She called it a generational change, a lot of turnover, and demographic change, too. So, David, let's start with you. Looking forward, how do you see this new Congress being able to actually legislate?
Well, occasionally you get a Congress, or you get a class that defines a generation. So in 1974, there were the Watergate babies. 94, you had Newt Gingrich. The Watergate babies pushed Congress to the left. The Gingrich people pushed it to the right. In this, we may have a class, we may call them the Trump babies, if they can remain coherent. And I would say it's a reasonably hopeful class for two reasons. One, it's much more diverse and looks like the way America actually looks. Secondly, it's reasonably moderate. One of the things that we've seen over the last few days is people done analysis of which kind of Democrats won. And in general, the ones endorsed by the more progressive groups did not do well. Those endorsed by the centrist New Democratic groups did very well. And so I happen to think the Democratic Party is moving to left, but a lot of Democratic voters are not moving to left, and they tended to prove some pretty big victories for moderates, and that may harken to something.
I'm picking up some optimism there. Mark,
yes,
I
mean it's refreshing optimism. No, I think it was a significant election. What I was most alarmed by was the president's announcement that it was a great victory for Republicans. The Republicans lost more seats than they did under Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush, both of whom accepted the fact that the party had suffered a shellacking. And I was particularly struck by the president's reaction at the post-press conference. Gene McCarthy, the late senator from Minnesota, once described a mean political opponent as being the type of person who, after the battle is over, come down from the hills and shoot the wounded. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did the next day. He went after, but named and shamed Republicans who had lost. I mean, the lone black Republican woman in the Congress, Mia Love, he went after personally and said, Mia showed me no love because of what it had. In that sense, I just never seen anything like it. The election was about Donald Trump. 65% of the voters said it was about him. Mm-hmm. And his dominance of American politics, to me, was complete in the sense that states, you could almost track the Republican vote for Senate or a major office with Donald Trump's favorable job rating in that state. I mean, Ohio, for example. And I think the victory, David and I disagree on this. I think it was an enormous personal victory and political victory for Nancy Pelosi. I really do. I mean, she was the one who passed health care in 2009 almost single-handedly, mm-hmm. and the party paid for it in 2010. And ironically, in 2018, it was the issue. The Democrats rode back, and I thought she showed iron discipline by keeping the party on that issue. And I think it's significant. 33 of 34 women elected to the House for the first time were Democrats.
So both of you have noted that demographically there were huge shifts with this new Congress.
Absolutely.
But they were largely in one party and not the other. Right. That's a fair assessment. David, what do you make of that looking forward at our biggest and strongest two parties? One path is clearly moving towards more representation of the general public, and one not so much.
Yeah, well, a couple things. First, Donald Trump seems to have walled himself in with 45% of the electorate. Mm-hmm. And so he's built some pretty strong barriers. It's hard to see people leaving and coming in. Second, it should be said that for all there was a blue wave or a huge surge in turnout for the Democrats, there was also a huge surge in turnout for the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is basically the white working class saying we're still hurting. You know, some of it may have to do with Kavanaugh hearings and things like that, but life in rural areas is still marked by huge numbers of men outside the labor force. You've got jobs that are part-time in the gig economy. You've still got a lot of economic strain, and those people just came out because they're still hurting. Now, can this party get outside that 45%? I don't think so. You know, I think Trump has really walled themselves in, and the party is a Trump party. And, you know, George Bush and John McCain and every other Republican spent so much capital trying to win over Hispanics, trying to represent the new America, Asian Americans, all the groups. And in a stroke, I think Donald Trump has ended maybe 2 or 3 decades of efforts in that direction.
Does that walling in then make it harder for these folks who are being sent to Washington to actually do their jobs?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Donald Trump ran on immigration. And for a lot of people, that was that threat, the threat of both a demographically altered country, but also a threat to their jobs and a threat to what they feel is their safety, pinions them that issue. And that's why I still disagree with Mark on healthcare, even though the Democrats, I still think if you look around the world, what's the issue that's dominant in country after country? It's national identity. Who are we as a nation? And that's a fundamental issue. Trump has one answer. I think the Democrats are still going to have to come up with a different answer, which emphasizes diversity.
So I want to ask you about this, Mark. Democrats, when they won control of the House, they also won the power to launch investigations into this president, subpoena powers, et cetera. The president has already promised a warlike posture if the Democrats start to investigate his personal and financial dealings. How does this play out?
Well, I mean, the president has to be sure that his troops are behind him. I'm not as sure that Republican senators like Cory Gardner in Colorado, who's up in 2020, or Susan Collins in Maine, who's up in 2020, are going to be enthusiastic about just joining lockstep support of the president in his positions. Just to pick up on David's point, I do think immigration is a major issue. I think it's been cavalierly and dismissed by the elites, especially on the Democratic side, and it's a legitimate issue and a real issue. And I think the Democrats have to come up with a response to it. But it wasn't up to the Democrats to set the agenda in this election. I mean, this was a midterm election. It's a referendum on the president, and I do think that the Democrats come out of this stronger, although they're going to face the fragmentation, the polarization of a primary, a contested primary, and which will try and pull the party to the left. There's no question about it.
I want to move on now to the other big story this week. That was the forced resignation of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and the appointment of his replacement, a man who's been openly hostile to the special counsel's investigation, that is Matthew Whitaker. David, Senator Collins, who Mark just mentioned, proposed today legislation that would protect Robert Mueller. How do you see that moving forward? Are Republicans move to do that?
Yeah, I was really struck by how aggressive she was, and even signals from new senators like Mitt Romney. You can see sort of taking her side on these sorts of things. I wonder if there'll be a loosening in the lockstep loyalty to Trump now. Whether some people will look around especially if they're not in solid red states, look around. I've got to establish some distance, and there may be a weakening in the loyalty there. So I sort of expect that to happen. But, Donald Trump does what he wants. And he's wanted to get rid of Sessions for the longest time. And he went against, I think, members of his own administration, members of his own party, and say, I'm just going to do what I want. And I'm going to pick somebody who's going to protect my flank. And what strikes me about Trump and his attitude toward the Attorney General is that all power is personal for Trump.
That's right.
That it's about, you've got to be loyal to me. It's not about the institution of the Justice Department or the institution of the federal government. It's about me. And so I think he just doesn't even see the possibility that somebody like Jeff Sessions could be serving a different loyalty than personal loyalty to Donald Trump.
But what does that mean then for something like the Mueller investigation, for the integrity of these institutions?
Well, it means, first of all, I think that Matt Whitaker's days are numbered at the Justice Department. When Donald Trump said today that he wasn't sure he'd ever met him, after praising him as a great guy just the last month in an interview, he's distancing himself. I mean, loyalty is strictly a one-way street with Donald Trump. I mean, Jeff Sessions was the first and only senator for a long time who endorsed Donald Trump's candidacy, and yet he disparaged him in conversation with many people as being dumb and a dumb Southerner and even worse. And the one blessing of this is that Jeff Sessions, like Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus, now will be spared that abuse, that daily ridicule that came from the president. I mean, to me, it's beyond comprehension that you treat people like this and expect that something. David's point about the Justice Department being a personal attorney who works for you, I think is absolutely on spot. I mean, that this is his approach. It has always been his approach to the Justice Department. And he wants an Attorney General who is his Attorney General, not the Attorney General of the United States.
David, very quickly, I want to touch on what was a very contentious press conference between the president and members of the press corps earlier. It ended in one of the members of the White House press corps having his credentials revoked. I've covered a lot of countries where that happens regularly. It's happening here now increasingly. How do you view that?
Well, I thought the revoking of Acosta's press credentials was silly. I thought that whole episode was sort of a distraction and silly. But what's not distraction silly is picking on 3 African-American reporters and insulting their questions. That's who Donald Trump is. I don't think that requires further explanation. But it's all, again, not respecting the institutions. The press has a role. Our job is to ask questions. Sometimes the questions are unpleasant. The president's job as a public servant is to answer the questions. And going off on the press the way he's done in a much more, frankly, bullying posture is simply to say it's me against these people. And we all know what he means by these people. And so it's an ugly moment.
Well, those 3 reporters you mentioned, I just want to name them as April Ryan, Abby Phillip, and our own Yamiche El-Sindor, who were singled out for particular derision and insult from the president. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, particularly Yamiche, because I watched it. I mean, it's true of his treatment of April Ryan as well, and then Abby Phillip today. But I mean, Yamiche asked an absolutely legitimate question about nationalism and the encouragement or sympathy that his position as a stated nationalist gave to white nationalism. And you know, we already are aware of support, echoes of support for him from these groups and individuals. And so he immediately attacked her for a racist question. I mean, this is the oldest gambit in the world. He does it over and again. It's a bullying tactic. It's a mean-spirited tactic. And it's, to me, it shows the pressure that he is feeling from this defeat that he suffered on Tuesday. I thought we got a little peek into how he treats those around him in the White House by the way he treated those in the parade. The Jim Acosta thing is unforgivable. To use a doctored tape from InfoWars to somehow make the case that he had mistreated this White House intern, which he did not do. And I don't know, I just wish Sam Donaldson and Helen Thomas had a shot at this guy. I mean, to have tough questions.
Mark Shields, David Brooks, good to talk to you as always.
Thank you.